Hey, have you ever wondered who wrote the song Celebrate Jesus? I tell you what, this is the coolest cat in the world. Now, don't adjust your sets, folks. It's not Tim McGraw with the beard. This guy's better looking, but he's also more accomplished singer, songwriter, producer, worship artist, pastor, author, speaker. It's none other than Bishop Gary Oliver. How you doing, Bishop?
Man, I'm doing great, Brant. Thank you so much for having me on. It's an honor to be with you today.
Oh, man. Well, the honor is mine, brother. I've kept up with you through the years, and I tell you what, you not only build the Jesus culture in your area in Texas with Encounter Church, man, but, man, people of all races have a home with Bishop Gary Oliver and your wonderful bride. And I'm telling you, man, so excited to connect with you. You've been on my list of heroes. Folks, you've been seeing so many different artists and movie personalities and people. Well, this is one of my heroes right here, Bishop Gary Oliver. And I tell you what, it's a long, long ways from Tulsa, my man, but celebrate Jesus and more than enough. And I was reading your bio as well. If you go to encounterchurchfw.org, that's encounterchurchfw.org. That's Fort Worth. You're going to see these beautiful people, and you're going to see Bishop Gary Oliver. And I saw an article of you years ago, man. It said, how do you describe this guy? All the different things that he does. But my guess is you do all of these things: the writing, the speaking, the singing, the preaching, the leading, the training, the publishing, the producing, because you're taking people to a higher place than they've ever been. And you can't do that unless you've been there first. You're a leader of leaders, brother. What's the latest going on with Bishop Gary Oliver?
Well, Brad, the mission for me is real consistent. And I am so presence driven. And I just love bringing people to the presence of God and teaching them how to accomplish that on their own. Because, once you get in his presence, man, you can become a presence junkie real quick. And I can teach you theology. I can teach you all kinds of stuff. But until you have that encounter with God, that encounter where you encountered him, you don't have to ask anybody, what was this? You don't have to ask anybody, how's it supposed to feel, or am I supposed to be different? No, those things happen. Those things happen that change your life, that change your mind, that change your, we can preach for the change of behavior, but you can't change people's behavior until they change their mind. And the mind has to be renewed somehow. And that's one of the great things that the Holy Spirit does for us, is he helps us renew our mind so that we think differently, so we can act differently, so we can live differently. And then the beauty of it is, man, we just get to bring Jesus everywhere we go, and we get to change the world everywhere we go. And that's really what's happening with us. We're just having church at Encounter Church, and man, we're seeing a lot of new people. That's really post-COVID. Everything is different, obviously. So pre-COVID, your social media may have been a sideline, but it has to be a main part of your service now.
Right.
And it will forever be a hybrid now, I really believe. And so our social media platform has expanded just exponentially. And a lot of that has to be thanks to my wife knowing me, because she is so good at all of that. And she's really helped in that area. But with that being said, we're seeing new people coming to the church that are not changing churches because they got disgusted at this church and now they want to bring their old sour attitude to your church. We're seeing people that are just finding Jesus, that are just finding him, that they don't know Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. They don't know anything. They don't know Matthew, Mark, Luke, nor John. They don't know anything about them. They just are here. And many of them are coming into our house and they don't even have a Bible. They've never had a Bible. And I'm getting to baptize their children, baptize them, talk to them about what baptism is. And in simple terms, not in church ease, but in simple terms.
Oh,
And it's so cool, man, to watch. And
Oh,
we're loving it.
it's got to be a joy. There's nothing like feeding the hungry, Gary. I mean, the story of Goldilocks and the three bears. This porridge is too soft, too hot. This porridge is too cold. This porridge is just right. Instead of exchanging sheep all the time, you're seeing new people, like you say, they're just starving. The hungry are hungry. And man, you know what? They're finding Jesus, and they're finding love and acceptance at Encounter Church with you. And I know you didn't ask me to do this, brother, but if you're in the Fort Worth area or you're driving distance, you got to get you some Bishop Gary Oliver's preaching, very transparent, very real. And, Jesus taught in parables. He was preaching to people that, from the scholars to people that never have ever read before, but he preached in a way that they understood. And I'm telling you what, this is a time like none other, folks, that we've got to tell people about Jesus and express his supernatural love that is really supernatural. And Bishop, you are supernaturally real, and we need Jesus people like that. Now, on your website, and folks, you see at the bottom of your screen there, you talk about building a Jesus culture. And tell us, I love the language of that. Tell me about that, man.
But we feel like the Jesus culture is real simple. It's that you love God with all your heart, mind, and soul, and you love your neighbors yourself. And, Jesus talks so much about love. There is a love law that this world is missing right now. And for Jesus to tell me explicitly in the Gospels to love one another as I have loved you, that's a pretty deep call. And if I got to love my neighbor as I love myself, then I don't even have to know the 10 commandments.
Wow.
I will live those 10 commandments.
That's right.
Because I will not steal from myself. So if you steal from yourself, we got deeper issues. So if you're lying to yourself, we got deeper issues here. We need to have another meeting. But generally speaking, no man has hated himself. That we love ourselves. We love ourselves so much that we buy the best for us. We want the best portion of meat. We want the best seat at the table. We want the nicest car. We want to live in the nicest home. All of the things that we do. But I got to love you just like I love myself. Then that's a pretty deep call. And I don't know that we're capable of doing that without first loving the Lord my God with all my heart, soul.
Wow.
And those two things are not two separate things. They're literally one and the same, because I can't love my neighbor without loving God.
Right.
First. And if I don't love God first, I will never be able to understand the compassion that I need to pour out on my neighbor. And in order for me to love God first, I have to encounter God and know that he loves me. I thought it was a very interesting, and I'm not going to drag this out, but I thought it was very interesting. I heard a testimony of a guy who had literally died on an operating table.
Wow.
And he was in a very, very dark room. And this guy considered himself to be an agnostic, not an atheist, but he certainly wasn't a Christian. He said, there's probably a bigger power, but I don't know. I just kind of let that, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. So I'm just going to live my life. And he dies on an operating table. And he said that he is standing in a dark room and he feels a light walking up behind him. And he said, and I was scared to turn because I knew who it was. And he said, in the course of the conversation, and this is where I want to go because he ended it like this. He said, in the course of the conversation, he said, God told me, ask me anything you want to ask. God said, I'm an engineer. I think I'm smart. I think I know probably some good questions here, but let me think about this for a moment. He said, and finally I said, okay, so what is the meaning of life? And when he asked the question, what is the meaning of life? He said, I heard God belly laugh. He said, that's what they all ask. And he said, so I didn't get a really brilliant question, but what is the meaning of life? And God said, to love. Simple. to love. And he said, and that man, and when you're hearing the man tell the story, it is so palpable in the room that I wept watching the video, because the guy said, I felt love surround me in a way I never felt in my life. And I knew that I had to come back and share the love of Jesus with people. Because at the end of the day, Brant, what really do we need? What really do we need? I don't need a bigger house. I don't need a bigger car. I don't need a better this, better that. I don't need more money. I'm eating. I'm healthy. You can tell by me. Look at me. I've fasted too much. But anyway, it's like
I'm fasting from fasting.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
That's me. I'm fasting from that. Somebody asked me the other day what I was fasting, and I said hard liquor.
I'm fasting from skydiving. I'm fasting from. Well, you know, brother, you're a breath of fresh air, and you've always demonstrated loving people. And you know, sometimes people give themselves away. I love you, even if you are this color. Man, I love you because you are who you are. You know, we celebrate each other. You wrote the song "Celebrate Jesus." When did you write that? And how was that song inspired when you did that?
Man, it's really kind of a simple little story, but that's the way so much of life is. Simple.
Yeah.
And we're always looking for what's the big secret. The big secret is to be present.
Wow.
That's the secret. Be present in the moment. I'll tell you about that later. But anyway, that's a whole other issue. But you have to be present for certain things to come to you. And so one of our children's workers, this was like in 1982, came to me and said, we are struggling to find a song for our Christmas or Easter celebration. And we want the kids to know that it's okay to celebrate Jesus, that it's okay to be excited that, you know, not that he died, but that he rose again.
Right.
We don't want him to get them stuck on the part of his suffering, but the part we want to get them really liberated from and understanding they have to know the suffering that he went through and the dying that he went through, but we need them to know it's okay to celebrate. And I said, give me a few minutes. I said, you may have the song right there. And I piano, and the whole song came just like snap. And I wrote the song and took it back. And I'll never forget this, Brant. The first Sunday we sang it was in the children's production. I taught it to my mass choir, which was like 105 voices back then.
Incredible choir.
Full horn section,
yeah.
Full band and everything back in the day. And I put them all up, taught them the song Celebrate Jesus. We did a real kind of a drive-in rock and roll. You know, I know everybody heard it from Integrity with the kind of the elevator music, you know. Jesus, celebrate, and all this stuff. So we did real driving Van Halen guitar, you know.
Yeah.
And so we did the song for 45 minutes. I could not shut it down. For 45 minutes, they sang the song. The whole church went nuts. So it wasn't just the kids that danced and celebrated. Everybody started celebrating and they were just excited because the song just spoke of the life of God. And it was simple. The song is simple. I find, Brant, that the songs that really stand the test of time and really last are the simplest songs ever.
Right.
It's not great big deep ones and wordy that, you know, 42 voice verses and,
yeah,
you know, written in the King James and the Amplified on the chorus. But it's, you know, it's just simple songs.
I know. Well, it come. You know, Jesus said, "You must be like a child to enter the kingdom." And I tell you, to know, because I've been a children's minister too, and youth and worship, and of course, you are who you are. I love that you're a pastor and a bishop, but you are a worship leader as well, and are. That tells me a lot too. You have a heart of David. And, I tell you, to know that that song was written for the children, that just, man, that you don't know what that means. So on behalf of all of the people, the billions of people who have sang Celebrate Jesus through the years, thank you for being a song receiver and receiving that, being present, like you say, to receive that song, man. You know how many times I sing that song? I didn't even know that you're the one who wrote that. And that makes it even better to me, man. And now there's a new version out that you were talking about before recording.
Brandon Camphor just released a new version of it. And man, it is just killing. It's doing great too. So I'm excited about it. They wrote another verse to it. They called me and asked me if they could write a little verse to kind of fit their vibe. And I said, absolutely. I mean, if I can do something to encourage young people, because first of all, here's the other part of songwriting to me is that our songwriting has to be theologically sound, because that is how we pass great theology from one generation to another so many times. Because a lot of people don't know theology, but they know Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound.
Wow.
They a wretch like me. They may not quote the Bible verse, but they know blessed assurance, Jesus is mine. Oh, what a forte. See, that's good theology. And when you sing those songs, you pass that good theology to the next generation, and they don't even realize what they're learning, but they're getting something that will give them a foundation to hang on to. And once you get your foundation straight, man, you can build a good house. But you can't build anything on a crooked foundation. So as songwriters, we have to write, and that's one of the things that they just jammed that song up. It was so good.
My gosh. Pastor, psalmist, bishop, leader of leaders, man. You train leaders and the churches that are under you. You told me when I got to meet you on the phone before I hopped on a plane that you come to Amarillo every once in a while.
Yeah, man. Love coming to Amarillo up there with
Power Church,
and
right?
Yeah, Power Church. I was trying to think of the name of it, but Power Church. And man, it's what a great church. And man, that's a thumping place. You talk about a church that's it is lit over there, man, and I love it. So I'm sure we'll be back before long.
I want to know what you are.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What would you, we've gone through an interesting time where our barefoot guitar playing theologians who have decided to leave the faith after writing so many worship songs. The point you just made, that our worship songs, our songs, period, but our worship songs have to be theologically sound. What do you say to that, to these worship pastors that some way or another, through disillusionment, or maybe through perhaps wanting more to be on American Idol than to be leading the saints in the presence? I don't know, but people have seen that. They don't know what to think about that. I used to sing their songs and they just walked away and they don't believe anymore. What does the Rockin' Bishop have to say about that?
Well, I don't think that, just like, for example, we just came through this whole situation with COVID.
Yeah.
I don't think that COVID made us anything. I think COVID revealed who we were. And I think after a while, you just can't keep hiding the leopard spots. I mean, pretty soon it's going to get exposed, and we get exposed to who we are.
Wow.
And I think sometimes that's who we were all along. Somehow people thought this was a game, or they thought this was, just easy. It's a pattern. It's, you pick up the pattern over here, you learn to write the song, you go get a few scriptures, you put them together, and they weren't good enough, possibly, just saying they weren't good enough to make it on American Idol, but they got good enough to be used in the church, and then they get a little notoriety, and they think they take the notoriety and then turn it into the world over here on a world stage. but I have watched that so many times backfire on people,
Right.
and it eats them up because you you have to have the goods to stay with the longevity.
Right.
Now, on the other hand, I know young people, like I know a young lady right now who just got a contract with Warner, and that she's got a 5 record deal, which is unheard of,
Wow.
with Warner Brothers for secular music, but she is sold out to Jesus,
Wow.
born again, praying, very cautious about how she writes, because her message is ultimately has a little shift in every one of them, points them back to Jesus.
Wow.
And it's so cool to watch. So for as many as we've had that walked away, I don't think that they really walked away. I think they were away and they just went where they really were.
Ah, boy, that is something else. Well, that's very revealing. What would you say to people? They say, hey, you know what? I want to use my talents for God, and I don't know where to get started. You know, some people go the Bible college. I went the Bible college route, but I'd already been a worship guy for 10 years before that.
Right.
You know, but how would you encourage song receivers who want to lead worship? Would you not encourage them to do it at the homeless shelter? It was one of the most fulfilling places you'll ever do it because they're truly hungry. But
Yep.
what would you say to the up and comers who want to you know immortalize a message? And the reason why I say that is my brother. I've done 7 albums and I instrumental and singing blah blah blah. And my brother made a statement the other day. He said, "Brant, I want to practice it before we immortalize it in the studio." And I thought, wow, what a profound statement, because what lives on beyond us are the things we write and the things that we sculpt, the things that we paint, the things that we build, and the things that we compose. And it's a noble task to be a song receiver. What would you say to the song receivers right now?
Well, I would say, first of all, that you have to realize that your first and primary audience is one and one alone, and that is God.
Uh-huh.
And if you can't worship his presence down in your room
By yourself.
by yourself, you're not going to get on the stage.
Good.
It's going to happen that has never happened for you before privately.
Uh-huh.
So I would have to say, whatever you see yourself doing publicly, make sure you can do that privately before you ever walk on that stage.
Right.
Because, and people say, well, how did that work for you? Well, first of all, I mean, church was so different back when we were growing up, especially me. I got you by several years. So when I was growing up, I played in church because I had to. There was no, and we didn't hire people to play, it was necessity. And I also started singing in church because it was necessity. But I had a gift at 4 years of age that when I sang, awed people. And they were like, man, did you hear that little kid sing?
You got some soul, brother.
Yes. But the thing was, when I sang, I gave myself over to that message. I gave myself over to that moment. And I was really there. It was real for me. And if it's not real for you, it ain't going to be real for nobody else.
That's right. That's right.
It's not real for nobody else. And don't think that you cannot manufacture. Well, there's a scripture that talks about when God was telling Israel to build altars, he said, and when you build an altar, make sure that you do not use a hammer nor a chisel on the stones that you build the altars from.
Right.
Because the inference is you cannot manufacture praise.
Right.
It has to be untouched, pure, from somewhere down in here that is a connection with God already. So those that are really wanting to step into that vein, I would say, man, sing to the chickens until they pass out, or be a dog, cat, or something. Figure out a way to use your gift, because nobody had to ask me if I sang. They knew I sang.
Yeah.
Because by 4 years old, I couldn't hold my song.
Well, what they saw was the overflow of who you are. Just like David, he would worship the Lord while he was watching the sheep. He would worship in private, and his relationship with the Father, what people finally saw was the overflow. And that's longevity, starting out with that. I tell you, why Elijah wanted water on the altar. Some would say he wanted water on the altar because the prophets of Baal would have a pre-lit coal underneath the altar. And when they whipped up enough oxygen and enough of their show, Baal would appear, but nothing was more than a strange fire. And we have to be careful what we're conjuring up. If we don't have this right, we don't have this into me see, as my friend Dennis Jernigan talks about, and we have this relationship right, and we overflow from that. If we're not careful, we could be whipping up strange fire. But Elijah would rather die and have the fire be real than to have strange fire. And
that's why Aaron's sons died.
Yeah,
they started a strange fire. It has to be. They were supposed to use coals from the fire that God started.
Right.
But they decided they would go start their own fire. And you have to be careful what you bring. And, some people think that spit and sputter and, quickening and jerking around and all this stuff and sweating is anointing. And that's not anointing at all.
No.
Because I've heard some of the old saints. I remember, you may remember Fuchsia Pickett.
I've heard that, yes.
Oh, my God. What a great woman of God she was.
Yeah.
I remember Pickett walking to the podium to pray, and when she get there, just say, "Oh God," and it just something would fall in the audience, and she could stand there for 15 minutes, and people would just go into worship. I mean, it just was unreal. It's what you carry. It's inside you. It's like David got to play for Saul, not because Saul thought he was a decent looking kid. Well, see if he can play the harp. No,